we will be addressing a little bit the success and failure factors in development. And let me see whether I can get the next slide up. Yes. Whenever I give presentations, I always ask, what do these companies have in common? And as David was saying, a company like Genzyme was really under the radar screen some 20 years ago. And the company was established back in the early 80s and under the radar screen. And today, many companies are in the space of looking for needles in the haystack, really working on rare diseases. That's where Prosensa is active as well. That's why we're here today as well. So our mission, you can see it on the left-hand side. I'll give a few comments about the company where I work. But the story on the right-hand side is much more compelling. It's Stan, 9 years old, diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy about 4 years ago. Parents noted that he was not a quick runner in the soccer field. He loves Ajax, one of our soccer teams in the Netherlands, as you may know. And Stan went from doctor to doctor. Till after about 2 years, finally a physician said, this must be Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Parents, on the one hand, liked that because they knew now it's clear what our son has. It's not just imagination. But on the other hand, there was a verdict. This boy most likely will not become older than 30 years because there is no treatment available. That's our mission, to try to find a treatment there and to make a difference, not just for Stan, but for the many other patients and their families, for healthcare professionals, but also for our employees and our shareholders. Now, if there is one slide on Prosensa I would like you to remember, it's this summary slide, so you can just close off after this slide. Company focused on rare diseases, a lead asset in Duchenne in phase 3, key collaboration with GSK. The word collaboration will come back a couple of times in my presentation. At the same time, we have retained a lot of value for ourselves in the deal with GSK, a platform applicable to rare and more common diseases, and very strong partnership with patient organizations. And I'm very proud to mention here that just a couple of weeks ago, Prosensa was named the most innovative European biotech SME. SME stands for small and medium-sized enterprises, so we don't want to copy all of us, but really are very proud of the fact that we were named by Europa Bio. If we look at our pipeline, what directly strikes here is the fact that the company has 6 compounds in development for one disease. They all have different connotations, Pro51 up to Pro55, in various stages of development, but all for the same disease. Why does a company work with 6 compounds in one disease area? It's because it's a disease with many different genetic origins, and I'll come back to that later. Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Who of you is aware of this disease prior to this presentation? Could you please raise your hand if you heard about this disease before? Same number as last year, about 50%. I hope it's not the same audience, because then you'll see some of the slides coming back, although we made a lot of progress. But it's a severe, debilitating disease which leads to boys, it's an X-linked disease, boys, which leads them to be wheelchair-bound by the age of 12, limited use of arms later on. They need ventilation, they can't breathe anymore later on in their lifespan, and very few will survive the age of 30, as I mentioned. And I'd like to share this video with you on Justus. Justus is a 19-year-old student. He's studying industrial design in the Netherlands, and he wants to share some of his experiences about this disease with you as well. Please put on the video.
Hands are the most important, then my lower arms, and then my upper arms. So I would like to show you, what I'm able to do right now, and what would be, what I would like to keep the same, or would like to improve a little bit. So now, for me, it's a bit difficult to get my arms on the table. Sometimes I have to do it this way, which hurts a bit at your fingers. So it would be better if your upper arm would be stronger, so you could put your arm on the table yourself. And my hands, so I can keep typing on the computer. And now, when I want to reach something, I have to walk with my fingers to get somewhere. So it would be great if my fingers just keep working the way they do.
Justus is a smart young man studying industrial design, and his muscle function gets less and less every week, every month that he's progressing in the disease. Typical example of somebody who's encountered with Duchenne. And the reason there is all these boys, they lack a certain protein called dystrophin. Dystrophin is a structural and functional protein in the muscles. If you don't have that protein, you'll get these symptoms. And this picture here is showing the presentation of the gene which is coding for dystrophin. There's 79 exons, coding regions. And now just imagine, look at this one here, exon 50, that something is wrong there, a deletion. Then you can imagine that the protein which is built as a result of these coding exons stops here at exon 49, and that protein is not functional. What we do then, we introduce a so-called 2O-methyl phosphorothioate antisense oligonucleotide, and shorter Pro51. That will come in. It will go to the exon next to the deleted exon, 51. It will mask that exon as an intron, skip that exon, so to say, and then as a result of that, you'll get a shorter coding for a shorter protein, which is functional and structural again. And we can do that on 51, on 44, on 53, on 55, and so on. And that's the reason why, instead of having one medicine for more diseases, like, for example, Gleevec works with Novartis, we are developing more medicines for one disease. This is really about personalized medicine. And when we were planning to develop all these compounds to help as many patients as possible, when we were thinking how can we maximize the development in a way that the success will be highest, this was the question in our boardroom. To be or not to be, that's the question. To partner or not to partner with a company. And after lengthy discussions, we ended up, you could say in a marriage, an engagement, whatever you may call it, a good relationship with GSK. And we are very proud of that. So in October 2009, we announced, after a dating period of some 9 months, that indeed we entered into a very strong collaboration with one of the largest pharma partners in the world, which was good for our investors because there came some non-dilutive finance in there. But more importantly, we had the best of two worlds, and I will elucidate that more. How does this deal look like? GSK, of course, would like to have it all. As every big pharma wants to have it all, like Sanofi wants to have the whole of Genzyme, but we could negotiate with them in such a way, and I know there are GSK people in the audience here, but we could negotiate with them in a way that we could keep a lot of rights for ourselves. So in orange you see the licensed compound, in gray the optioned compounds. Because we as a company want to build a mini Genzyme. David is gone anyway, so I can say that now, but we want to build a small Genzyme because I see all the values of Prosensa, of Genzyme in Prosensa as well. It took me a while, by the way, to not mix up Genzyme and Prosensa when I joined the company. So we need to create value with this company. And the deal we had with GSK made it to the top 10 deal in European biotech companies in 2008-2010 timeframe. We're very proud of that as well. But this one, this email, one of many we got after the deal, was one of the most inspiring ones. It's a grandmother of a Duchenne kid who says, to think that this could really become a reality and that I might not have to watch my only grandson die before me just sends chills up my spine. These kinds of emails go around in a company whenever we have a press release. Now, the orphan world, as David was saying as well, 25 years ago was under the radar screen. I dare to say that still today, it's a very uncharted territory, a tierra nueva, really a place where many stakeholders do not yet know how to really act with patients, with regulators, with payers. We are still at the very beginning of the orphan world. And this will happen if big companies or any company will enter this space to make money. If that's the only objective, we'll have shipwrecks. So the partnership model which Prosensa and GSK have is quite different. The small ship here, that's Prosensa, and the big one here is GSK, guided through the narrow channel of Suez. We call that partner partnerships. And Prosensa has many of those partnerships. It all started with academia, the Leiden University Medical Center, the origin of our science. We then had many patient organizations. In fact, the first 5 years of the existence of Prosensa, we were funded almost entirely by patient organizations. You can imagine that at that stage, when you have 500,000 euro or dollars from a patient organization, you can really have 4 or 5 people working on the science. So it's really a company which only went for venture capital back in 2008, almost 6 years after its inception. The government helped out a little bit as well. VCs came in, 2007 by the way, and then finally indeed GSK came in to help as well. Now in the meantime, this whole collaboration is going very well. We entered into a phase 3 trial with GSK earlier this year. We announced that. So the lead compound, Pro51, also called GSK 2402-968, entered into the last stage of development, and hopefully within the near future we'll know whether we can confirm the very encouraging results we've seen so far in phase 3 trials. Why did we enter into this partnership in the first place? It really was about maximizing the chances of success. And any advice I have on trying to add value as a small biotech company would be to look for partnerships in a way that you can still retain value for yourself as well. And I'd like to take you to a number of hurdles which we envisaged and we are still seeing on a weekly basis. Hurdle number 1 is really about the rarity of the disease as such, both in having physicians to understand the disease. Duchenne, by the way, is really an exception. The fact that half of you knows about this disease is quite extraordinary. But the fact that in this Ajax stadium, 100,000 people are sitting and only very few are affected by Duchenne makes it more difficult to indeed identify patients, certainly in clinical trials where you want to have as much as possible an homogeneous population. And you can't blame a physician. The fact that in his internal textbook of internal medicine on Duchenne or on Fabry or on MPS III, there's only a few lines allocated to those rare diseases makes that many physicians do not recognize these diseases. In fact, for Duchenne, it takes about 2 years from the first visit, first symptoms, to a correct diagnosis. For Fabry, it can take up to 9 years. For Pompe, it can take many years. And in many cases, these patients end up in the wrong diagnosis. They are then labeled as a limb-girdle patient, whereas they are a Pompe patient. And at the moment that a treatment is available, they're not recognized and not taken out of that box anymore. So the rarity is a challenge in many different aspects. And just to share that with you, in order to classify as an orphan drug in Europe, the number of patients in the normal population is less than 5 in 10,000. NICE in the UK set ultra-orphans 2 in 100,000, so 1 in 50,000 patients to classify as an ultra-orphan. The lead compound of this collaboration with GSK is 0.5 patients per 100,000. So you really talk about an ultra, ultra rare disease, which makes it even more memorable that a company like GSK or companies like Pfizer and Novartis are entering this field. So it's really about this one needle in a large haystack to find the right patients. Hurdle number 2, it's all about the science and the animal models. If we just could define an animal model which then can be extrapolated to human beings would be great. It can't be done. In Duchenne, it's very difficult to find the right model. There is one, but it's virtually impossible. Manufacturing. I would say, I dare to say, if Genzyme would not have had any manufacturing issues in their enzyme replacement therapies, then David Meeker would probably still be CEO, but not of CEO of a Genzyme Sanofi company. Probably today, Genzyme would still be an independent company. Manufacturing is key in development. And again, in a collaboration with GSK, we had about 12 people in manufacturing ourselves. Now we can tap into a whole department at GSK. Clinical development, same thing there. Functional outcome parameters. certainly in rare diseases. Let me just give you a quick view on how that works in Duchenne. A functional outcome parameter there is a so-called 6-minute walking distance. You ask a boy to walk for 6 minutes in a corridor and you measure his distance. A normal, healthy control would be walking around 700 meters, depending on his age. A Duchenne boy cannot reach that same distance and will show a sharp decline from around the age of 7. So in order to validate an outcome parameter like this one, you really have to do work as well. Natural history work, registries, and so on. More importantly, as we also heard yesterday, many patients have different outcome wishes for themselves. Walking is one thing, but Justus, for example, the boy I showed you earlier, he can't walk anymore. He wants to continue using his computer. Boys with MPS, or girls with MPS especially, they want to continue to comb their hair, want to go to the toilet by themselves if possible. So it's totally non-regulated outcome parameters, and that on a rare disease population, that's a challenge in itself. Hurdle number 6. It seems easier for this person, by the way, to run under the hurdles rather than above them, but that's the regulatory pathway. And Chris Garabidian will be talking about that later on. When you talk about rare diseases, we sometimes, now often, more than once, have to educate regulators as well, because there are many issues which are not well known there. And I was very happy to pick this up from the internet the other day, that now there are plans in the US that for really unmet medical needs, there may be faster approvals. The FDA is showing some change when it comes to unmet medical needs. But I was even more pleased to see in this Bloomberg article that a company like GlaxoSmithKline was mentioned in particular, which means that we have the right partner not just to work on development, but also on making sure that the framework for regulatory approval will be taken care of in the right way. Hurdle number 7, the last one, and the most difficult one. That's about pricing and reimbursement. And when we see the orphan world as an orphan arena, once that we have done all our safety and efficacy and quality work, we enter into the area of getting our price and reimbursement. In fact, as you know, we're all fighting diseases, but at what price? I mean, an unmet medical need, a disease which needs to be conquered. We do our best. 12 years of development work, and yes, we won. We go to the regulators with our hundreds of thousands of data, and then they say, sorry, we're not going to reimburse. That happens, unfortunately. That's why it's of key importance that in a good partnership model, payers and payer involvement will start very quickly. HTA, we all know it as health technology assessment. I think that for rare diseases, HTA often means a hurdle to access, if we apply it in the normal, traditional way. It all has to do, of course, with the fact that high-priced products do enter the spotlight very, very frequently. And this was coming up last year in the UK, that a company in the rare disease space was heavily criticized for overly pricing a new orphan drug. And that is something about sustainability where we all have to be very careful about. And then finally, if we also have our pricing and reimbursement, we pass the finish line, we passed all the hurdles, we finished the marathon, then it all starts. Because then the real work in the real life really starts. So after 12 years of achievement, then it really starts. And then you have to start thinking, well, you shouldn't start thinking by that time, by the way, because then it's far too late. But then indeed, a good diagnostic infrastructure should be in place. Centers of excellence should be in place, should be created where companies can play a key role, or that patients are not going from any physician to any physician. Treatment guidelines, when to start treating, how to treat. Expanded access for those patients who are not covered by the label. Registries should start long before approval, and today we will be focusing a lot on registries as well in the session. Central, dedicated funding. Let not every hospital by itself pay for these often expensive treatments. And last but not least, a very strong patient network. And in the Duchenne space, we really are happy with a very, very strong patient advocacy group. So these are a few of the building blocks which have to start earlier prior to approval, but which really is the challenge after the finish line is passed. I hope that from my presentation it became very clear that I think that the orphan world is still very young. It's only 3 decades old approximately. It's less than 30 years ago that the Orphan Drugs Act was passed in the US. It's 10 years ago here in Europe. So the 2 elements which I think are very important in the orphan space are sustainability and partnerships. And that's all to help kids. And this is an email we got around Thanksgiving last year. It was sent to our medical director, Giles Campion. And this person from India wrote, "Dear Giles and Prosensa team, I really appreciate the work which you and your group is doing for our DMD kids." And later on he says, "You are making a difference in our lives." We're not there yet. We haven't come to a solution really yet. We are still in a development stage. But the fact that our vision of trying to make a difference was so clearly copied by this person from India, "You making a difference," gives us the feeling that we are on the right track to help boys like Stan and his peers and to conquer a disease which as of today is not treatable. Thank you very much for that introduction, and we'll go now to the next part of the panel discussion. It's strange if somebody else is not thanking me, actually, but thank you very much, Hans, for this presentation. We'll now go to the next part. So I'll just continue here, as a matter of fact. And you see I changed the logo. It is no longer a Prosensa logo, but I'm now using actually an email which we got as Prosensa as well. And that's also the prelude to the panel discussion which we'll have in a few minutes from now. And this email we got as well. It was from a family where they say, "We are a family from this and this country. We have a son, his name is, and he's diagnosed with muscular dystrophy." And these parents already knew exactly what the deletion was this boy had. They really wanted to help him, of course. They mentioned that they were going to send us all the test results. We got attachments with all the papers from his physician. And the claim really was, "Please help our son. It's a dream of a father and a mother." This is the kind of dialogue, communication, which we often see with parents and patients in the rare disease space. Parents who are sometimes more knowledgeable about the disease than many people in the company. And that's the topic of the next panel discussion. It's a panel about when to start a dialogue with various stakeholders in the development process. Now, of course, in more common diseases, that's a very usual thing. When it's about rare diseases, then the patient and parent community plays an extra important role. Because very often we talk about patients, but in rare diseases we talk also and should talk with patients, but with caution. Just want to give you a few examples here. When we talk as a company about information, we present data, patients and parents will directly interpret data as hope, hope for a solution. When we talk about an investigational compound, which still has a long way to go, patients will often see that as a medicine. When we talk about a clinical trial, they'll see it as a treatment. And finally, when we talk about a treatment, an intervention, they often see it as a cure. It's important to keep this in mind in all the kinds of communication we undertake with patients, with parents. Every single press release which goes out from Prosensa, we always are very, very cautious about this element to really make sure that in no way patients who are reading these things as well could interpret this in the wrong way.